I lost 3 stone before I touched a weight. 13 months. That gap wasn't laziness. I'm Neil. I came off 6 medications by treating metabolic repair as a sequence, not a to-do list. In the next 12 minutes, why I walked for 13 months before any resistance work. What a Christmas week of travelling to see the family showed up in my blood test like, and what happened to my inflammation markers in the 3 months after I finally started. Here's what I got wrong about exercise for most of my adult life. I thought it was the engine. Move more, burn more, fix the body, start from day one, push through, earn the results. That's the story we're told. Join a gym in January, stick with it this time. Turns out that assumption has a flaw, and it's not a small one. Tim Spector, Professor of Epidemiology at King's College London, co-founder of Zoe, one of the most cited scientists in his field, has been sitting with this question for years. His data from the Twins UK study is the kind of thing that stops you mid-thought. Identical twins, same genes, one exercises regularly, one doesn't. You'd expect a meaningful weight difference, right? Years of training versus years of the sofa. Average difference, 1 to 2 kilos. That's it. Not stones, not even half a stone. 1 to 2 kilos across years of tracked data between the exercising twin and the one who doesn't. Spector breaks down why. Around 70% of what your body burns is resting metabolic rate. Largely fixed, largely outside your control. Around 10% is digestion. Physical activity accounts for roughly another 10% of total energy expenditure. That's your 10% worth having, just not the thing that moves the needle on its own. So if exercise isn't primarily a weight loss tool, what is it actually for? Inflammaging and why it changes everything. Professor Janet Lord researches what she calls inflammaging, chronic low-level inflammation that accelerates as we get older, sits underneath most metabolic conditions and quietly causes damage for years before anything shows up on a blood test. This isn't the inflammation you feel after twisting an ankle. This is the slow, silent kind. Her step count data is specific enough to be useful. People doing 3,000 steps or fewer, high inflammaging, consistent finding across her research. People doing 5,000 to 7,000, inflammaging cut by roughly 50%, and people hitting 10,000 or more, essentially no measurable inflammaging. Now I want to be straight with you about the 10,000 figure. That's roughly 8 kilometres a day. On a normal working day, most of us aren't getting close to that. The honest version of Janet Lord's data for anyone with a job and a life is 6,000 steps is the realistic daily floor. And at that level, you're still cutting inflammaging by something close to half. Now that matters. That's a meaningful daily target for a working adult. But the mechanism is the important part. Movement doesn't just burn calories. It reduces systemic inflammation. That's a different mechanism, a different timeline, and a different result entirely. Think of chronic inflammation like a house where the central heating's stuck on, full blast. July, nothing you can do. It's uncomfortable and it's wasteful. And if it never switches off, things that should last for decades start wearing out faster than they should. Your body's running with high inflammatory load for years is exactly the same. The damage accumulates quietly. You don't feel it as a single thing. You just feel heavier, slower, harder to shift, harder to recover from. That's the house with the heating stuck on. Here's the problem with going straight to hard exercise when the heating's stuck on. You're already adding more heat to an already hot house. You're asking a system under stress to do more work. Some people manage it. A lot of people get injured in the first 6 weeks or burn out or just don't adapt the way they expected. And they conclude they're not built for exercise. They're not built for that timing of exercise. Different thing. The heating has to come down first. That's what the 13 months was actually doing. One more piece of science worth understanding before I get into what I actually did. Most people default to cardio. When they finally decide to start, running, cycling, the cross trainer, and cardio has its place, walking especially, which I'll come back to. But the compound effect lives somewhere else. Think of cardio like hiring a cleaner for an hour. The house is spotless while they're there. The moment they leave, mess starts accumulating again. You burn the calories during the run, then you stopped running. Done. Resistance training is installing a dishwasher and a washing machine. Upfront effort, learning the movements. The first few weeks of awkwardness, but now the house is cleaning itself. Muscle tissue burns calories at rest every hour of every day, including while you sleep. 1 extra pound of muscle burning an extra 50 calories a day forever. That's not renting, that's buying. Cardio is useful. Resistance compounds. The reason this matters for timing, if you start resistance training in a heavily inflamed state, recovery between sessions is slower. Adaptation is slower. Injury risks is higher. You're trying to install the dishwasher in a house that's overheating. It can be done, it's just harder than it needs to be. And the results reflect that. This matters whether you've had a diagnosis or not. Inflammaging develops over years before any blood tests flag it. If you're in your 40s and exercise isn't shifting much, the inflammation question is worth asking before the training question. Before I get into the timeline, 13 years of NHS blood tests, the GP conversations, the numbers that went wrong and then came back, real data, properly documented, no agenda. If that's the kind of channel you want to follow, subscribe. That's what this is. Boxing Day 2023, I looked in the mirror and made a decision. 18 stone, on 6 medications. Couldn't walk up the stairs without getting winded. I did not join a gym. What I did instead, I sorted the eating window, cut the UPFs, started walking. That was it. Every day. Around 6,000 steps. Some days more, no structured training, no weights. Just keep the body moving while the real work happened with food. February 2024, all 6 medications stopped and I kept walking. Spring, summer, autumn 2024. Eating well, fasting rhythm was in place. Walking daily. The weight was coming off. 3 stone over that year. No resistance work, none. Then December 2024, the Christmas week. I travelled to see family and friends over Christmas. Not one household, several. You're a guest. You eat what's on the table. You don't make a fuss. There's no fasting window when someone spent 3 hours cooking. That's just reality. And I'm not apologetic about it. Family matters more than a 12-hour fast. But what it meant in practice was a week, actually 10, 11 days, of proper UPFs. The full Christmas spread at multiple houses, travelling between them, disrupted sleep, no real walking routine. The kind of week, fortnight that felt fine in the moment and really did show up clearly afterwards. January 2nd, 2025, first blood test of the year. CRP, that C-reactive protein, the inflammation marker, came back at 6.2. Now normal range is 0 to 10, so technically within range, but 6.2 after a year of eating well told me exactly what that Christmas week had done. I wasn't surprised. A week of UPF and disrupted sleep will do that. What it showed me was how sensitive the system had become. That single bad week was measurable on a blood test 2 days into January. That reading also told me something useful about the previous 11 months. If one Christmas week pushed CRP to 6.2, what had the clean year been doing to it? I don't have a mid-2024 CRP reading to prove it, but the direction of travel was clear enough. January 2025, the resistance work starts. Same month as that CRP reading. Returned from Christmas, back to the eating rhythm, and added resistance training for the first time. Not a gym, I kept it simple. Weighted squats, 28 kilos, weighted lunges, dumbbells, 3 movements, 3 sets of each, aiming for 8 to 15 reps. Working hard enough that the last rep of the last set is genuinely difficult. Not impossible, just honest effort. 3 sessions a week, 9 sets per session. When I cleared 15 reps on the first set comfortably, then the weights went up. That's it. Nothing clever, no program off the internet, just progressive overload. More weight when the current weight stops being a challenge, applied constantly 3 times a week. The first sessions felt fine. Not heroic, fine. Manageable. Recovery between sessions was quicker than I expected for someone who hadn't lifted anything in years. 52 years old, 30 months of walking, and the first proper resistance sessions didn't wreck me for a week. I think that's what starting with lower inflammatory load actually feels like. 13 months of groundwork meant the body wasn't scrambling. It had something left over to actually respond with. April 8th, 2025, CRP was 1. 3 months after that 6.2 Christmas reading, 84% drop. Now I want to be careful about what I claim here. I can't separate how much of that drop was the return to clean eating after Christmas and how much was the resistance training specifically. Both were happening simultaneously. That's not a clean experiment, it's real life. What I can say is this: clean eating plus walking for 13 months got the system to a place where one Christmas week showed up as 6.2. 3 months of clean eating plus resistance training brought it back to 1. The combination works. The sequence matters. The resistance work through 2025 was gradual, very gradual. I'm not going to pretend I was smashing personal bests every month. Some weeks the sessions happened. Some weeks life got in the way. The weights crept up slowly. 22 kilos came 28 kilos and squats by the end of the year. Incrementally heavier through the year as the first set kept clearing 15 reps. What changed noticeably was body composition. Same kind of weight on the scale as months earlier, but measurements telling a different story. Clothes were fitting differently. That's resistance training doing what resistance training does. Not dramatic, consistent. Forging steel analogy is the one I keep coming back to. You don't see steel being made. You just put iron ore in the furnace and keep the heat on. The transformation happens out of sight gradually until one day you've got something that didn't exist before. That's what the year of resistance work felt like. Unremarkable week to week, noticeable across the whole year. If this makes sense to you, here's how I'd approach it. Phase 1, food and fasting first. 12 weeks minimum, tighten the eating window. 16 hours fasted as a starting point. Remove UPFs where you can. Real food, not a diet plan. This isn't optional if you want the resistance work to land properly. Give the system 12 weeks before adding any structured training. Walk during this phase, great. Every day, 6,000 steps is your daily floor. Not because it'll transform your body, but because Janet Lord's data shows it cuts inflammaging by roughly half. And that's exactly what needs to happen in these first 12 weeks. If you hit 8, 10,000 or even more on a good day, great. But 6,000 is the honest target for someone with a job and a life. Phase 2, introduce resistance. After phase 1, not before. Keep it simple. You don't need a gym. Weighted squats, weighted lunges, a pair of dumbbells. 3 movements, 3 sets of each. Working hard enough that the last rep of that last set is genuinely difficult. 3 sessions a week. When the first set clears 15 reps easily, add some weight. That's the whole thing. How to know when you're ready? If you have access to blood tests, ask your GP to include CRP alongside the next routine bloods. It's a standard marker and most GPs will add it if you explain you're monitoring inflammation as part of a lifestyle change. Under 3 is a reasonable target before pushing hard on resistance work. If you don't have blood test access, 12 weeks of consistent phase 1 work is a reasonable proxy. By then, the inflammatory load from processed food and disrupted sleep patterns has usually started to shift. Timeline expectations, honest ones, week 6 to 8 of phase 1, energy more stable. Sleep usually improves. Hunger signals change. First 4 to 6 weeks of resistance work, sessions feel harder than they should. Normal adaptation takes time. 3 months in, first meaningful body composition, changes visibly on measurements, not necessarily on the scale. 12 months, that's when it starts to look like something, not 6 weeks, 12 months. One thing that isn't optional, if you're on medication, diabetes medication especially, blood pressure medication, please speak to your GP before changing your eating windows. Fasting changes how medication behaves. That conversation has to happen first. I've put together a free tracking template, eating window, daily steps, CRP if you get it tested, weekly check-ins, somewhere to put the data so the pattern becomes visible over time rather than just felt. Links in the description. Educational content only. This is not medical advice. Speak to your GP before changing your eating habits, your fasting window or your medication, especially if you're on diabetes or blood pressure medication.